In my years on the bench in Providence, I've come to understand that the heaviest burdens people carry rarely fit inside a courtroom's rigid boundaries. They're carried in the lines of their faces, the quiet tremble in their hands, and the weariness in their eyes. One particular Tuesday, a woman walked into my courtroom carrying a weight so heavy it seemed as though it would break her. If you've ever felt like you're falling short as a parent, overwhelmed by life's demands, I urge you to listen closely to what happened next, because what unfolded in that room is a message every mother and father needs to hear. The clerk called out her name, Sarah Jenkins. As I did with all cases, I glanced down at the paperwork first, then at the person. A citation. An expired parking meter, $35 fine. A simple matter, a small amount, but in this instance, as I looked up from the file, I saw a woman whose expression told me she had been carrying much more than just this parking ticket. Sarah was in her late 30s, dressed in a faded coat too big for her hair pulled back hastily, and a worn purse clutched protectively against her chest. By her side stood a little boy, no older than 6. He held an action figure, twisting its arms absent-mindedly, eyes never leaving his mother. He didn't need to speak. The quiet tension in his small frame told me all I needed to know. This child, like so many others, could feel the weight of the world pressing down on his mother, and he too was trying to shrink into the background, not to add to her burden. I greeted Sarah, and when she spoke, her voice was fragile, almost hollow. "Good morning, Your Honor." The citation indicated she had parked in an expired meter spot for over 3 hours. People often offer excuses at this point: broken meters, weather problems, bad timing, but Sarah didn't. She took a deep, shaky breath and said something that made the entire room fall silent. "I didn't lose track of time," she said softly. "I knew it was expiring. I just couldn't leave." Her words cut through the air. To admit breaking the rules, especially knowingly, usually means something much more serious is at play. I leaned forward, intrigued. "What building were you in, Sarah?" I asked gently. She lowered her gaze to the boy beside her, placing a trembling hand on his head before answering. "The Children's Hospital, Your Honor." The room seemed to stop. A hospital. The temperature of the room shifted as if the very word had frozen time. Sarah wasn't just any defendant in front of me. She was a mother whose world had been turned upside down. Her voice cracked as she shared that she had been at the hospital for 3 weeks. Her son had been having seizures, and the doctors were still struggling to find the right medication. On that particular day, he had a particularly bad episode, and she didn't even think about the parking meter. All she could think about was getting him inside, keeping him safe. By the time she had finished with the doctors and was allowed to take him home, there was a yellow parking ticket on her windshield. And now, she stood before me, facing a fine she simply could not afford. What struck me was that $35 was more than just a fine to her. It was the cost of a small meal, or the money for a gallon of milk. It was the last few dollars she had, not for herself, but for her child. I looked around the courtroom. Everyone, from the officers to the lawyers to the onlookers, was silent. We weren't just watching a case unfold. We were witnessing the raw truth of a mother's sacrifice. In my years of service, I've seen many come through with rehearsed excuses. But Sarah? She came in with nothing but the truth. And the truth, in my court, holds more weight than any excuse. I turned back to the $35 ticket, now seeming almost absurd in light of everything Sarah had shared. The cost of medicine for her son had been greater than that fine. She had only $60 to her name that day, and the medication took precedence over the parking meter. Her struggle wasn't about disregarding the law. It was about the desperate choices a mother must make to keep her child safe. The law may not have a heart, but the courtroom, I believed, could. I turned to the prosecutor. "What do you think, given Sarah's situation?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with empathy. He looked down at the documents before him, then back at Sarah, his gaze softening. "Your Honor, given the circumstances, we have no interest in pursuing this fine." I nodded, a small sigh escaping me. But my job wasn't just about dismissing a ticket, it was about offering a lesson in mercy. "Sarah," I said, looking her in the eye, "this ticket is dismissed. The fees are gone, but I'm going to ask you for something else." She looked confused. "I want you to take that $35, and instead of handing it over to the city, I want you to take your son out. Get him a treat, maybe an ice cream or that action figure he's been wanting. And then, for yourself, I want you to take some rest. Not just any rest, but the kind where you finally feel like you're not carrying the weight of the world alone. Her eyes softened, and a small tear escaped down her cheek. It wasn't just relief I saw, but a sense of dignity restored. A mother's work should never go unacknowledged. "Leo," I called, looking at the little boy standing beside her. "Can you come here?" He approached shyly, his eyes still filled with the innocence of a child who had lived more than his share of hardship. I looked at him and then back at his mother. "You have a very brave mother," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Most heroes don't wear capes. They wear faded winter coats and carry hospital discharge papers." The room remained quiet, as if every person in the gallery was reflecting on the struggle that so many face in silence, unnoticed. The truth that day wasn't about the legalities of a parking ticket. It was about seeing the humanity behind the rules, understanding the person before the violation. As Sarah and Leo left the courtroom, they no longer walked with the weight of the world on their shoulders. They walked with the knowledge that their struggle had been seen and that the community around them cared. And as the doors closed behind them, I was reminded that true justice isn't about the money, the fine, or the rules. It's about seeing the person, hearing their story, and offering them the mercy they need to carry on.